All of this is further frustration for pipeline advocates who want to see shovels in the ground for this summer's construction season. So let's get the reaction. Alberta's new Premier-designate Jason Kenney joins us now from Edmonton. Mr. Kenney, thanks for doing this. First of all, what do you have to say to the news that the federal cabinet may not make a decision on the Trans Mountain expansion until sometime in June?
Well, it's frustrating to see all of the endless delays. Quite frankly, this project should have been shovels in the ground well over a year ago. But I do understand the federal government has to make sure that it's done everything legally necessary to comply with the courts around the whole issue of Indigenous consultation. Prime Minister Trudeau told me that they felt there needed to be 2 more weeks to complete that work. I just hope that we're going to hold them to that, and we're going to keep trying to build a national coalition so that we can get a fair deal and actually get our economy rolling with the pipeline.
Are you concerned at all that the Trudeau government could block the pipeline if you repeal Alberta's carbon tax, if there's some kind of linkage here between the two?
No, the Prime Minister didn't suggest that during our conversation earlier this week. I think the two are unrelated. We will be joining the provinces of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick in opposing the federal carbon tax. We don't believe that punishing people for heating their homes in a cold winter or driving to work or buying their groceries is an environmental policy. We will be, as a new Conservative government, imposing a levy for major industrial emitters of greenhouse gases to reduce by 45 megatons CO2 output from our economy. And it will have built into it a strong incentive for shrinking carbon intensity. So we think we'll be doing our part, but punishing people for living ordinary lives, for us, well, it just makes us poorer, and it hasn't gotten any pipelines built.
Yeah, but on pipelines, I mean, this delay is another illustration of the fact that it really is the federal government that's driving the bus here. You talked a lot about pipelines during the campaign. How do you get them built if you don't have a cooperative relationship with the federal government?
Well, the Premier Notley tried that, and look where we are. With the cancellation of the approved Northern Gateway pipeline, the killing of Energy East by new federal regulations, the surrender to Barack Obama's veto on Keystone XL, Bill C-69, which we call out here the No More Pipelines Act, Bill C-48, the Northern Tanker Ban, a cap on our oil sands, the threats of a federal carbon tax, and so much more. We hope to be able to sit down and find common ground with the federal government, with other provincial governments. But if this whole approach of obstructing the flow of our resources, which help to pay the bills in the Federation, if that obstruction continues, we will use the political and legal tools at our disposal to assert Alberta's vital economic interests.
One of those tools is proclaiming legislation to turn off the flow of oil or gas to BC. Aside from that being potentially unconstitutional, how would that possibly help Alberta's economy?
It's something that Peter Lougheed was prepared to do back in the early 1980s to demonstrate that Alberta meant business in opposition to the National Energy Program. It's what brought Pierre Trudeau to the table to renegotiate and mitigate the devastating effect of the National Energy Program nearly 40 years ago. And so this is an idea that has nonpartisan consensus. It's a law the NDP brought in at our behest. It's just that they never proclaimed it into law. The BC New Democrats called their bluff. They said that Premier Notley had no intention of using it. We're putting the New Democrats in Victoria on notice that if they continue with their obstructionism of Trans Mountain, that we will be prepared to effectively increase gas prices in the Lower Mainland. So if they won't allow us to sell our energy, then why should we be allowing them to benefit from it?
So you really actually would do that? It's not just an empty threat?
That's the whole point.
Okay. You've also talked...
Now, let me just be clear. I just want to be clear. It's not something that we won't actually reduce shipments on day one, but we'll proclaim the law to give us the power to do so, just to be clear.
Okay. You also talked a lot about a referendum on Canada's equalization system. This would presumably cost money to hold the referendum itself, but what would be the result if Albertans say that they think equalization is unfair in that referendum?
We've said that we would hold that referendum in the fall of 2021, concurrent with our scheduled municipal elections, if we do not by then have a coastal pipeline or substantial progress on it, and if we do not have the federal government withdraw anti-energy policies like Bill C-69. So those are the conditions that I've laid down. The idea here is to use a decision of the Supreme Court from 1998 called the Quebec Secession Reference, which says if a province holds a referendum on a proposed constitutional amendment and a clear majority votes in favor, the feds must negotiate that amendment in good faith. So what we would be saying is this: we Albertans are generous. We've helped to provide hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth across the country through federal transfers, partly through equalization. If we cannot get a fair deal for our resources that pay those bills, then we're prepared to force negotiations on equalization. It doesn't actually change it or amend the Constitution, but what it does is to elevate our request for fair treatment to the top of the national agenda. In Canada, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's what Quebec has shown us for 40 years. It's about time that we were prepared to assert ourselves with similar strength.
Just very quickly, I want to ask you about your phone call with the Prime Minister. You've referred to him in the past as a dilettante and a lightweight. I'm assuming the call that you received from him on election night was a little more cordial. How do you see things working with him going forward now on issues that you have a little more commonality on?
Well, the Prime Minister, I'm sure, I know he's had some choice words for me as well. He was my opposition critic for a couple of years when I was immigration minister. And you know what? We've sparred, but we've also found common ground in the past. I've always said I want to start these political relationships with Ottawa, Victoria, and Quebec in a diplomatic way, seeking common ground. But ultimately, if those governments are determined to undermine Alberta's future prosperity, then we will use these other tools to assert, I think, our reasonable request for fairness in the Federation.
Okay, Jason Kenney, thanks for speaking to us from Edmonton today.
Thanks so much.